Hi everyone, it's great to be here and I'm looking forward to this brief session. I've been asked to give a brief talk about governance structures for organizations, or more simply, how to formally organize a group, what that means, what options are available and what they might entail. So I'm going to go into screen share, give you some slides. There we go. Before all that, I'd like to give you a bit of background about myself and my experiences. I've helped set up and run small companies. I have also worked in governance and senior management positions within organizations of various types and sizes in the public, private and third sectors, from small 4-person companies up to large multinationals. I am a member of the AMASE management team. I am also the convener of Inclusion Scotland, which is an umbrella disabled people's organisation. And I'm a consultant with a consortium working on inclusive governance project for Scottish autism. I've also been an advisor on various Scottish Government reviews, including a review of charity law in Scotland, and a legal expert advisor to the Rome Review in mental health. The theme for these 2 days is capacity building of autistic people's organisations, or APOs, which are a type of disabled people's organisation, DPO. Some of those will be about upskilling already existing groups and organisations, and some will be, like this talk, about starting organisations. I'm going to talk about approaches that are available and what they mean practically, and how the internal structures of these approaches may differ, if at all. So first of all, a quick overview, what I'm going to talk about. So why have a formal structure, ways of organising and structuring, scope of the organisation, some legal requirements, what does a constitution or articles of association need to have, what is a brief overview of different types of structures of organisation, and then where to look for more information. So first of all, why have a formal structure at all? Well, it gives clear and consistent accountability. It outlines where responsibility and decision making lies. It's very helpful for getting a bank account. You need it to get a bank account. And human rights treaties require governments and entities engaged in government activities, public services, for example, to recognise and interact with GPOs and therefore APOs in specific ways whenever they're doing any kind of decision or legislation which will affect those groups. Typical structure is a minimum of 3 positions, all of which need to be filled by separate individuals. These 3 positions are the convener or chairperson, the treasurer, and the secretary. Broadly, the standard responsibilities for these are: the chair leads the meetings, the treasurer manages the finances, and the secretary does the minutes and agendas for meetings in conjunction with the chair, and oversees the paperwork. You can have more positions than this, obviously, but these are the standard, what you would call officer positions. So they're the minimum you'd have on a board of trustees or a management committee. You don't have to have a board of trustees unless you're a charity or a trust. And usually, if you're not a charity or trust, the group is just called the management committee, since they're responsible for the smooth running of the organisation. Otherwise, they're just normally called the board for short. A board differs, however, in that its responsibility is to ensure that the organisation is doing strategically what it's supposed to, and has more of an oversight role than a day-to-day role, which is what our management committee or team tends to have. So I've broken down ways of organizing and structuring into three main camps. You have incorporated organizations, for example, community interest companies, SCIOs or Scottish charitable incorporated organizations, limited companies, charities, non-incorporated organizations, for example, small clubs and associations, and then there's others like trusts and cooperatives, which I don't think are particularly relevant, even though they do exist. So if you are looking to start an APO or an autistic people's organizations, how are you going to decide which of the above is most suitable? I'd say look at three simple things. Size, so how big or small is the organization you're wanting to give some formal structure to, or what you want to do. Scope, what are your aims and objectives for the organization? And then funding, so how do you plan to fund, if at all, any of your activities? You don't have to go and find funders. You can have some other way of doing it, but you need to think about that. I think the most important step here is scope. This can help you decide on the size and therefore whether you want to go and seek funding from other sources and how you want to go about that and how much you might need. Scope. Scope can be broken down into three simple questions. What do you want to do? Or what activities will you be hoping to engage in? Where do you want to do these activities? So will you be local to a town or city, or as big as a local authority, or are you looking to do something nationally across the whole of Scotland? And then when do you want to do these activities? So how frequently do you want to do them? And some of that's going to be based on need and the nature of the activities that you're looking to engage in. My advice, if you're starting out completely fresh, as a group who haven't set up an APO before, is that your best bet is to begin small, begin local. As such, I will therefore be going into a little bit more detail regarding SCIOs and CICs, and only touching on charities and limited companies. The most suitable type of formal structure starting out is generally a club or an association. If you're seeking funding, these would be the absolute minimum requirement, as they enable you to get a simple clubs association bank account in which to put any funds. Kind of up above that would then be community interest companies or CICs, or SCIOs, as I said before, Scottish charitable incorporated organisations. You may need for funding purposes to be a community interest company or a SCIO, as some funders do require that you're incorporated, not all of them, but some, and this is because it gives them certain legal guarantees within those kind of formal structures. As well as if you're planning on employing people, then really you should be incorporated in some fashion. You'll need to be. SCIOs are regulated by OSCA, or the Office of Scottish Charitable Regulation, and CICs are regulated by the Office of the Regulator of Community Interest Companies, so a lot more of a mouthful. Next in scale above those would generally be a limited company and or a charity. These can vary in size considerably and are, of those listed above, the most complex and require the most to successfully run, as they have the most oversight and the most legal requirements. They're regulated by Companies House and OSCA. Also, it's worth noting that you can be both a charity and a limited company, which generally you should be. I think that's a requirement now, actually. So what are the other legal requirements? So some of them will be, as an organisation seeking formal recognised status, The next thing you will need is a constitution or articles of association. These terms are largely interchangeable and are essentially the agreed upon rules that govern the organization at the top. So they're not like policies and procedures, they're literally about how the organization works broadly. They can be simple, running to a couple of pages, or incredibly complicated at 30 pages plus. Much of this will depend on the size and scope of the organization. A simple club containing a handful of people and doing a single specific activity, for example, doesn't need a huge 10-page constitution when 2 pages will be fine. So what does a constitution need to have? Well, the easiest solution for getting your constitution sorted is to get an off-the-shelf one. That's a template one that you can use, just filling out the minimum of details. The key is to make sure that you get an appropriate template for the type of organization you're choosing to be. So at its core, a constitution will list the name of your organization, the aims and objectives, members, and what types of members you might have of your organization, the officers, what their roles are, the board officers and what their roles are, and then any obligations, legal or otherwise, that you have as an organization that you need to fulfill will be listed there as a total minimum. What will differ between types of constitutions for each organization will depend largely on whether you're incorporated or a non-incorporated organization. So then what is the difference between these? So incorporating is essentially turning an organization or group into a company. An incorporated company is a separate legal entity in its own right, recognized by the law. Corporations can be identified with terms like Inc. or INC or Limited or LTD in their names. They become legal entities separate from their owners, who also have their own legal status. And as a legal entity, the incorporated company can employ people, own property, sue people, sue on behalf of the company, etc., or be sued as itself, rather than directly individuals. An unincorporated association is an organization set up through an agreement between a group of people who come together for a specified reason to usually make profit, but not necessarily, for example, a voluntary group or a sports club. You don't need to register to be an unincorporated association, and it doesn't cost to set one up. However, the individuals running the association are directly liable for its activities, and the association is not a legal entity, which means it can't directly own property or employ individuals or sign contracts to, I don't know, lease a property, for example. You can be a charity or not. If you do wish to be a charity, then you would be registered by OSCR. You'd be governed by OSCR, the rules that OSCR requires. They'd need to approve your constitution, and you would need to pass what's called the charity test. There's no requirement as an unincorporated association to file an annual return unless you're a charity, and you don't have any statutory requirements on the minimum number of meetings you have to do, for example. They're really light on bureaucracy. They're really, really cheap to run, mainly because you can't lease property or anything, stuff like that. Next is a corporation. They're usually recognized by co or CO after their name. They tend to offer stock that can be bought and sold, and therefore carry a huge amount of risk. Not only can the corporation be bought out of the control of those who set up and run it by others, its liability isn't necessarily limited, and so the owners of the company bear the full burden of any financial and legal risk. The owners, those that hold stock, can receive dividends and money from the company's profits, whether they work for the company or not, based on the amount of the company shares that they own, for example. A limited company, however, or LTD, tends to not offer stock to be bought or sold, and the liability of the owners is therefore limited to the amount of shares that they own or purchased when they became part of ownership of the company, to the value of the shares that they bought. They don't receive any dividends or direct profit from the company, though they can be paid for their roles on the board, because normally they'd be board members. The owners would be board members. SCIOs, or Scottish Charitable Incorporated Organisations, have limited liability, like limited companies and community interest companies. SCIOs are governed by OSCR, but unlike charities, don't need to be registered with Companies House, and so they have slightly less stringent regulations. For example, there's slightly less requirements on accounting thresholds for them. SCIOs must have their office in Scotland. They have to have a minimum of 3 trustees or board members who have the same legal duties as charitable trustees. They must also have a minimum of 2 members. Members can be trustees, but they don't have to be. Members are there to ensure that the SCIO is acting in good faith in line with its aims and objectives. SCIOs, as a form of charity, can't engage in party political activities, and they can only have charitable purposes. CICs, or community interest companies, are a form of social enterprise business that exists to benefit a specific community rather than private shareholders. They must have a community interest statement, which is similar to aims and objectives, and they need to outline what their business plans are in order to how to meet their kind of community interest statement. They also have to have an asset lock, which makes it clear that any assets that the company owns can only be used for its social objectives, and also state how pay is limited to any shareholders in the company. It also has to have its constitution approved by Companies House. CICs are regulated by ORCIC, or the Office of the Regulator of Community Interest Companies. So there you go, brief overview. So what next? Where to find constitution templates? There are many places to find these. A simple Google search would throw up Hoard. I suggest starting in 3 places. OSCR, which has several different templates for you to download, from associations through to SCIOs and up to charities, and you can find that's their address. And there's ORCIC, who also give a huge number of advice and guidance, as well as model constitutions, and that's their address. And then Companies House, which gives the biggest array of different types of company and guidance. I totally suggest getting in contact with them. I've found them previously to be extremely helpful when speaking to. Yeah, it's really worth contacting the different regulators to have a discussion about what it is you're aiming to do, and they can give you really helpful advice about what might be the best fit for what specific activities that you're wanting to do. And so last, a few things for further consideration. So registers, SCIOs, CICs, charities, companies all need to have registers. These list their members. They also list the details of trustees. The registers are submitted to Companies House or OSCR. They need to be kept up to date at all times. So there's paperwork there. Costs. So each of these, aside from unincorporated associations, will cost you money. You'll have to pay to be registered. You will also need to pay, in some instances, to get a company seal. The seal is literally a physical object. It's official. It can be used if you have shareholders to mark official share certificates. You can also use it. You'll also need it to have an official head office. It will also list the number for your company and charity number if you're a charity as well. Your head office needs to be your place of business. You don't have to have a specific venue of your own, as there are places that provide a service where you can register at their address, and then they can then forward any relevant paperwork to an individual like the secretary or the chair, for example. And they're required to display your name, etc., which in some instances is a legal requirement for that to be physically displayed somewhere. You don't need an officially registered logo or trademark to have any of the above, though if you do end up going down that route, it can afford you some extra protection against imitation and fraud, and a greater ability to sue if you need to. For example, if somebody puts your logo or trademark on top of a bit of paper or displays it somewhere which you don't like. You will also need to have an auditor who will audit your accounts and help you submit them to the tax office and Companies House. There are lots of different companies that do this. There are some that specialize in different forms of accounts for different forms of companies. I suggest doing it even if you're really small, and I've found that most accountants are extremely helpful and really won't charge you too much, especially if you're a small organization, because there's not much work for them. Thinking ahead. This is kind of probably the most important thing. Should you choose to set up an organization with the hope of picking the right form at an early stage, will make it life easier for you further down the line. So for example, a club or association can be turned into a charity relatively easy by simply changing its aims and objectives to ensure that it meets the charity test. It could also become a community interest company. It wouldn't have to fulfill the requirements to be a charity to become a community interest company. And it can aim to make profits, which can then, some of which can be passed, as I mentioned earlier, onto the owners or shareholders, though the bulk will be passed back directly into the company to further its aims and objectives. Becoming a SKIO also involves passing the charity test, as well as details above, like the minimum trustees. Whereas a community interest company can later decide to become a SKIO or a charity or a private limited company, or even go back to being an association. A SKIO is really limited in what it can do if it wants to change, and really it can only either dissolve or become an incorporated charity. Private limited companies come in two types: limited by shares and limited by guarantee. The main difference is that the first keeps its profits after tax and can therefore pay dividends, and the second invests, as I mentioned, all its profits back into the company. The important thing here is that all of the above, and charities in general, are governed by a huge array of legal requirements, and it is absolutely important that those are understood. The minimum requirements will be laid out in the various templates and on the sites that I mentioned earlier, and I'll move back to those. And what I've given is a very quick, brief overview of what is involved. That there's much more I could talk about. For example, representative constitutions, different types of constitutions, the differentiation between members and trustees, different types of membership that you can have in your constitution, and also what are the governance obligations on trustees, depending on their role and their background, to name but a few. I hope this has been helpful and given you some ideas of how and where to start. Thanks for your time, and best of luck going forwards.